There is a question that has followed humanity for thousands of years. A question whispered in quiet rooms, asked during sleepless nights, and carried silently in the hearts of millions. Why do we suffer so much? Suffering appears in many forms. Anxiety about the future, regret about the past, loneliness, fear, loss, disappointment, unfulfilled expectations, the feeling that life should be different than it is. Most people spend their lives trying to eliminate suffering completely. They chase comfort, control, certainty, and approval. They believe that if they just solve enough problems, achieve enough success, or avoid enough pain, suffering will finally disappear. But something strange happens. Even after success, even after comfort, even after security, suffering often remains. The reason is simple, but difficult to accept. Much of human suffering does not come from life itself. It comes from how the mind interprets life. Events happen, loss happens, change happens, uncertainty happens. These are natural parts of existence. But the mind adds something extra. It adds resistance. One ancient teaching described suffering as the gap between reality and expectation. You suffer not because something happened, but because you believe it should not have happened. You suffer not because life is uncertain, but because you demand certainty. You suffer not because change occurs, but because you want things to remain the same. In other words, suffering grows from attachment to how life must be. Imagine holding sand tightly in your hand. The harder you squeeze, the faster the sand escapes. If you relax your grip, the sand remains. Life behaves in a similar way. The more you try to control everything, the more anxiety you feel. The more you demand perfect outcomes, the more disappointment you create. The more you resist reality, the heavier suffering becomes. Stopping suffering does not mean eliminating pain. Pain is unavoidable. Loss will happen. Mistakes will happen. Difficult moments will appear in every life. But suffering is different from pain. Pain is the event. Suffering is the story you tell about the event. Two people can experience the same loss, yet respond in completely different ways. One collapses under resentment and bitterness. The other transforms the experience into growth and wisdom. The difference is not the event. The difference is perception. Many philosophical traditions have emphasized this point for centuries. They teach that the external world cannot be fully controlled, but the inner response can be trained. Your mind has a habit of turning temporary discomfort into permanent identity. A failure becomes I am a failure. A rejection becomes I am not worthy. A mistake becomes I always ruin. Everything. Notice what the mind is doing. It turns moments into conclusions. It takes single events and builds entire narratives around them, and those narratives become the prison in which suffering lives, the first step toward ending. Unnecessary suffering is learning to observe your thoughts. Your thoughts are powerful, but they are not always true. When a negative thought appears, pause and question it. Is this a fact or a story? Is this reality or interpretation? This simple practice creates space between you and the storm inside your mind. Another major source of suffering is comparison. The modern world constantly invites comparison. You see other people's achievements, lifestyles, and highlights. It becomes easy to believe that everyone else is moving forward while you are falling behind. But comparison is a distorted mirror. You compare your struggles to someone else's presentation. You compare your behind the scenes reality to someone else's carefully selected moments. This illusion feeds dissatisfaction. Contentment begins when you redirect attention back to your own path. Your journey is not meant to look like anyone else's. There is another powerful truth about suffering. Much of it comes from fighting emotions instead of understanding them. People are taught to suppress sadness, avoid fear, and hide vulnerability. They try to stay positive at all costs, but emotions that are suppressed do not disappear. They simply move deeper into the mind, where they grow stronger. An emotion is like a wave. If you allow it to rise and pass naturally, it dissolves. If you fight it, the wave becomes larger. Learning to sit with discomfort without panic is a profound skill. When sadness appears, acknowledge it. When fear appears, observe it. When anger appears, breathe through it. You do not need to become the emotion. You only need to witness it. The more awareness you bring to your internal experience, the less power unconscious reactions have over you. Another cause of suffering is the illusion of permanent happiness. Many people believe life should feel good most of the time. When difficult moments appear, they assume something is wrong. But life moves in cycles, day and night, winter and summer, growth and decay, success and failure, energy and rest. Expecting constant happiness is like expecting the weather to remain sunny forever. It ignores the natural rhythm of existence. When you accept that discomfort is part of the journey, it stops feeling like a personal attack. One philosopher wrote that happiness does not come from having everything go right. It comes from developing the strength to face what goes wrong. Strength grows through acceptance, discipline, and perspective. Perspective changes everything. Consider how small many of your worries appear when viewed from a wider lens. The argument that felt overwhelming last week, the embarrassment that felt unbearable years ago. Time reveals that many struggles were temporary storms. Your mind magnifies the present moment, but wisdom sees the long horizon. Practices such as reflection, meditation, and mindful breathing helped create distance from constant mental noise. When the mind becomes quieter, clarity appears. You begin to notice how many thoughts are repetitive fears about situations that never actually occur. You notice how often you criticize yourself more harshly than anyone else would. You notice how many of your worries are predictions rather than realities. Calm awareness interrupts this cycle. Another principle taught in ancient philosophy is the distinction between what is within your control and what is not. You cannot control the past. You cannot control other people's opinions. You cannot control every outcome, but you can control your effort, your choices, your character, your response. When you focus energy on what you cannot control, frustration grows. When you focus on what you can influence, strength grows. This shift from control to responsibility reduces unnecessary suffering. Gratitude also plays a powerful role. The human brain has a natural bias toward detecting problems. This helped early humans survive threats. But in modern life, it often causes people to overlook what is working. Gratitude retrains attention. When you intentionally notice what is already present in your life, the mind begins to see abundance instead of absence. This does not mean ignoring problems. It means balancing awareness. Another overlooked truth is that meaning reduces suffering. When people endure hardship with a clear sense of purpose, the experience becomes more tolerable. Difficulty without meaning feels unbearable. Difficulty connected to growth or contribution feels transformative. Ask yourself regularly what kind of life you want to build, not just what problems you want to avoid. A meaningful direction gives pain a context. Finally, remember this: you do not stop suffering by creating a perfect life. You stop suffering by developing a wiser relationship with life. Accept change. Question your thoughts. Allow emotions to pass without becoming them. Focus on what you can control. Practice gratitude. Build meaning. When these principles become habits, suffering begins to lose its grip. Life will still include challenges, uncertainty, and loss. But instead of feeling trapped by them, you will move through them with clarity and strength. And in that space between experience and reaction, you discover something extraordinary. Peace was never hidden somewhere in the future. It was waiting inside your awareness all along.